pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, City Clerk, may we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Fong?
Present.
Commissioner Linscott?
You have to tap it to wake it up.
Present.
Commissioner Rao?
Here.
Vice Chair Shar? Chair Casultron?
Present.
All present.
Thank you very much. We will move on to the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion?
Prior to the motion, I believe there's some corrections.
Yes. So I had a quick correction. So the where is it? Hold on, let me pull it up. On page 12, where it says Chair Kosulcharan conducted a non-binding straw poll to support incorporating emergency response times into programmatic recommendations. The minutes captured say that there was a vote in favor from Kosulcharo and Linskog and Rao. In favor, Sharf and Fung opposed, and no abstentions. That is incorrect. I actually voted to oppose that straw poll. So if we can correct that, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, and we had additional corrections, I believe, on item number 3. It says Chair Rao opened the public comment period. We had transitioned the chair, so that should be the new chair on item 3. And the motion as well. Well, the motion's right, but the opening was probably something you need to fix. And then on item number 5, this is page 5, I think. Yeah, so the motion by Commissioner Linscott to revisit the scoring system, put less weight on school routes. I did not support that motion. If we can change that, please. My motion was actually called out at the end, which was to discard the criteria proposed and use the feedback provided at council. Thank you.
City Clerk, did you capture that?
Yes.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the revised minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Great, thank you very much. Do we have any postponements? No postponements. Right, then we will move to the oral communications portion of this meeting. City Clerk, how many comments do we have?
No hands raised on Zoom, Chair.
Wow, okay. Then we will move on to the public hearing. So agenda item 2 is to consider a hillside exception for grading on slopes exceeding 30% to create a flat yard area, R1 exception for garage design, design review for a new 2-story residence, minor residential permit, tree removal permit for this application, and I won't read all the numbers. So we'll now open the public hearing. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Just want to very briefly introduce Emi Sugiyama, who will have both of the public hearing items tonight. I don't really have much more to say on this. I'll probably have a little preamble on the next item. So with that, I will turn it over to Emi.
Through the chair, should we do ex parte disclosures?
Sure, Commissioner Rao, this sounds like a good time to do that.
All right, let's all do ex parte disclosures, starting with Commissioner Fung.
Nothing to report.
I did meet with the neighbor in the area and was given a tour of the location.
I have walked around the site on the backside.
I walked around with a neighbor too. I have had no contact with the property owner.
I walked around it, but I haven't spoken to any of the neighbors.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we'll go back to the staff report.
All right. Thank you, Chair Casultron and Commissioners. Good evening. I'll have video
have my screen. There we go. Emi Sugiyama, planning staff, here today to discuss the request for a hillside exception and various residential permits for a project on San Fernando Court. The subject property is located on San Fernando Court. It's within the Monte Vista neighborhood and is adjacent to Blackberry Farm Park. It is currently surrounded by other single-family residential uses. It is within the R1 7.5 zoning district, and it currently has a single-family residence on site. The application includes various residential permits to allow for construction of a new two-story residence. These include a design review permit for design consistency and massing considerations, a minor residential permit for a rear-facing balcony, and an R1 exception for a garage located in front of living space. The project also includes a request for a hillside exception and tree removal to allow for a flat yard area. The hillside exception is to allow for grading of more than 500 feet on slopes exceeding 30%, and the tree removals would be associated with that grading. It should also be noted that the design review, minor residential, and tree removal permits are typically reviewed at a staff level, but are being brought before the commission tonight due to their connection with the two requested exceptions. This site plan outlines the proposed two-story residence with the first floor outlined in light green and the second floor outlined in dark green. As previously noted, this project requires a design review permit to allow for a reduced second story side setback in a larger second to first floor area ratio. Additionally, the applicant is also seeking a minor residential permit for a proposed rear-facing balcony, which is shown here in yellow. Design review projects are required to provide an identifiable architectural style that is generally consistent with the neighborhood pattern. To ensure that architectural design requirements are met, staff refers projects to RRM, our third-party architectural firm, for review. In this case, RRM provided a number of comments, many of which were addressed by the applicant. However, the applicant's design did not address comments related to providing a sloped roof and reducing massing to match the neighborhood. The applicant also requests an R1 exception to allow for the garage to be located in front of the living area. Staff supports this request based on the lot's shape and topography and the existing pattern of garages in the neighborhood. Here you can see the residences on San Fernando Court with garages aligned with or in front of living area demarcated by the yellow circles. That concludes the summary for permits related to the residential development. Staff is recommending approval of the minor residential and R1 exception as proposed, and conditional approval of the design review permit on the condition that the design be revised in accordance with RRM's recommendations to decrease the building height and add sloped roofs. As for the hillside exception and tree removal to allow for grading of a flat yard area, this site plan indicates the areas where the project is sloped more than 30%. That is in the light orange, and then the proposed grading areas are in the dark orange. The red dots indicate the location of oak trees to be removed to accommodate this grading, 4 of which are over 12 inches and therefore are considered protected. And then the green dots indicate the location of oak trees to be preserved on site. The applicant's initial proposal included grading most of the rear yard. However, in working with staff, the applicant has proposed a revised design, as shown here, to reduce the grading to an area bounded by a 5-foot setback from the drip line of the large 36-inch oak tree on site and a 10-foot buffer from the rear property line to accommodate grade drainage and to provide an additional buffer between the proposed grading and Blackberry Farm Park. Here you can see a view from Stevens Creek Trail to the project site, indicating that the trees that will remain in orange and the trees that exist between the property and the trail within the park area. The trees in red shown here are to be removed. For the hillside exception and tree removal permit, staff is recommending that to accommodate the rear yard area, your commission conditionally approve both of these permits to ensure that the setbacks recommended by staff are maintained and that retaining walls do not exceed 5 feet in height. The revised design would also eliminate the need to remove one of the 5 protected trees on site. And with that, staff recommends that your commission find the project exempt from CEQA, conditionally approve the design review, design review, hillside exception, and tree removal permit, and fully approve the R1 exception and minor residential permit based on the draft resolutions. And then I believe that the applicant also has a presentation.
If I could just interrupt something I forgot to say at the outset, is that unlike most of the residential projects that come before the commission, this is a fully discretionary project, so it is not subject to the Housing Accountability Act or any of the other things that often limit discretionary action on behalf of the commission. So you have, this is more how projects used to be, say, 10 years ago.
Thank you very much, Emmy, and to Luke. Do we have any questions for the staff from commission before we move to the applicant presentation? Commissioner Rao, go ahead.
So I see a number of variances between what is allowed and what is proposed, and yet staff is recommending approval. Could staff clarify why that is?
Right. So the design review, I'll start kind of just with that, is kind of an exception outlined by our code. It really is just a process that you have to go through to reduce the setbacks and massing. We see it very often, to be honest. And so that one we're not seeing as something too far out of the ordinary. The R1 exception, again, we do have a lot of neighborhoods where the garages are in front of the living area. This is something that was more newly imposed, and I would say more strictly codified as we've done more updates to have objective standards. And so we are potentially going to see more lots like this that are confined that may need those R1 exceptions. And then finally, for the hillside exception, this I will say is quite new. I don't think that we've had something come through like this in quite a while, at least not that I could find. And so that is, again, written through our code that if you do exceed 500 square feet of grading on 30% slopes in R1, then you do need a hillside exception. And so, again, it's just the process that's outlined. We're recommending approval, a conditional approval of that with the consideration given to, again, the setbacks and the modified design, but without strict precedent.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? I did have one if there are no others. The project is listed to be in a liquefaction, inundation, slope instability hazard zone. And I was curious what measures will be taken just to make sure that any grading that does happen doesn't impact the Blackberry farm below.
Right. So the project provided a geotechnical report that was peer-reviewed by one of the city's third-party geologists, and the recommendations of that report must be incorporated within the structural drawings to come, and any redesigns would also need to be re-reviewed by the geologists to make sure that they wouldn't have those impacts.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I did have one more question. There is a note around replanting of removed trees, and that there's an option that the applicant can actually pay an in lieu fee if the replanting of removed trees is not feasible. What are the scenarios in which replanting a tree is not feasible?
So in this case, because there is other tree canopy within the rear yard and the rest of the areas are rather confined, you may find that planting the oak trees that we're recommending for planting, we may not have enough space to accommodate all of those replantings on site and for them to thrive and be healthy. So that's why we have that option, is just to ensure that if the space is limited and we're asking for larger trees, we do still collect a fee to accommodate that elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from commission? Yes.
So on the tree removal, I mean, I know we just approved a city work plan to improve our city canopy and figure out, how we build up our city canopy, considering that we have one of the lowest canopies of all the cities in Silicon Valley. Is it just that we have no objective standards for that yet, and that's why that's not a consideration, or how are we okay with approving so many trees being removed?
Right. The threshold for R1 tree removals is relatively low, especially when they're in the 12-inch to 24-inch range, which these are. We basically require that the applicant show that they will replant and or provide in lieu fees for that, and that's the finding in and of itself. So, again, it's not a very high bar.
Sorry, on that point, Is this to be considered R1 or RHS, given the sloping where the trees are being removed?
Right. So this is zoned R1. We do specifically for the grading in the rear yard that we're talking about, and for the hillside exception itself, we are applying some RHS standards. Not all of them, just some to that portion.
So would that not be the case for the tree removals?
So the property is still zoned R1. So the trees are still on an R1 zoned property. So that finding would still be related to the R1 zoning. I understand that they're in connection with the grading. However, those could be removed under that same finding without the grading occurring.
So can staff clarify what portions of the project would be considered under RHS versus R1?
So again, it's not necessarily that we're changing the zoning halfway through or anything like that. It's just that we pull over some of the standards from RHS and apply them to this R1 zoned property. And those include standards for things like the retaining wall height, where we can make some additional considerations. Also the materials applied to those retaining walls. Really, it's more for specifically the grading and retaining walls that we're looking at those standards.
And have you had any other similar project in the neighborhood with the backside facing Blackberry Farm that would serve as a precedent for comparison?
Right. So a number of the neighboring residences do have previous grading. However, that grading occurred prior to us having our hillside exception requirements in place. So we don't have a precedent for this type of discretionary review before you.
Thank you.
Sorry, one more question. What's the fire zone that this house is in?
That's a good question. I would have to double check that.
Can you let me know?
Yeah.
During this meeting? Thanks.
I did look it up, and I think there is no fire zone, but please do confirm that. Do we have any other questions from commission? Okay, then we'll move to the applicant presentation.
Hello, my name's David. I don't really have too much of a presentation. Emmy did a great job. Thank you very much. I designed the house and worked with the civil engineer to work on the site in the backyard. The client came to me 3 years ago, and he was going to purchase the house, and he wanted to know if he could do a modern house because that's what he really wanted. And we had talked to planning, and they said, yeah, we can go down that route. So we came up with some designs, gave it to planning, and we've gone down this route of figuring all of this out, which seems to be happy with planning, and my client's happy with the house. And he also wanted to do the backyard. And I was like, well, that's going to be a little bit trickier. So we've been working a bunch with planning and public works on the backyard. Originally, my client was hoping to go all the way back to the property line. He wanted to have a sports court and, the whole thing, because the lot, there is no backyard. That seemed to be an issue, so we worked with public works planning and decided that if we could move the sports court area back 10 feet from property line, that we could, one, save a tree, do quite a bit less grading, and remove one of the originally proposed 4 retaining walls in the back. Now we're only proposing 3 to get to that grade. So less retaining walls, less visual impact, and saving some trees. We also noticed that originally back in January, when we were supposed to have the first meeting, that we saw some of the neighbors and people of the community were very concerned about the trees being removed. So we did, by moving the retaining wall back, we are saving one of the trees, which is a larger, more predominant tree, visual from the Stevens Creek Trail below. And also, I'm not sure if people really realized it, but that property line is 30-something feet back from that. If you're down at Stevens Creek, there's like a retaining wall that's kind of a visual thing that you can see, and then the properties kind of go up that steep hill. And the property line is actually about 30 feet back from that retaining wall, and there's quite a few trees between the property line, that new 12-inch tree that we're keeping, and that retaining wall down below. So the visual impact from the actual creek will be very similar to what it is now. There were a couple trees that are going to be removed that you will see that the canopy will change a little bit, but we're not going to be having a house just open to Stevens Creek. I heard some quick questions or comments about the construction. So per geotech report, we're going to be required to do a pier and grade beam for retaining walls, house, everything. So the piers will be drilled, the dirt will be removed to the top of the property, and then removed off the property to somewhere else so that we can't retain dirt on the property. And my client was hoping to plant trees at the rear yard. We have some space there depending on canopy of how it works. He would love to have trees there just for privacy from the creek trail. If not, potentially on the side yard or in the front yard to get some oak trees back. So that's going to be the tricky one, as you had mentioned, just based off of existing canopy. The canopy there is pretty extensive. So that's all I got. Pretty simple. And I'm here if you guys have any questions about the project that you'd like to ask.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the commission? No questions? I have one question,
Yep.
but okay, go ahead, Commissioner Rao.
Maybe a question for both staff and the applicant. Was the applicant made aware that a hearing would not be necessary if certain design options were considered?
Yes, but unfortunately, one of those, no matter what, we couldn't do anything about. And that was the garage facing front. The lot's just too narrow. There's not much we could have done about that. So we were going down this route anyways.
Could staff clarify, was that one exception enough to trigger a design review?
Right, so that exception would be enough to have a hearing before you all. The design review permit is separate. The R1 exception is what he's referring to.
So that one exception of the garage being further in front than
Correct.
allowed would trigger a hearing.
Right.
Great.
Were there other alternatives that the applicant considered to further reduce the deviation from the general plan?
Regarding the garage or the whole design?
The whole
in general?
design.
So that was a tricky one because my client was very adamant on a more modern design. So we were going down that route no matter what. Flat roof, parapet style, roof overhangs in some areas, so very different style. That was the route we were going. The garage, we played with a couple different options when we found out about that, but just the way it's shaped, it's so difficult to make that one not work, unfortunately.
And question for staff, is this the first of its kind in a modern design in this area? Specifically by Blackberry Farm?
This close, I believe potentially it is, but I think in other Monte Vista areas we have had more modern designs. However, they did incorporate the reduced massing and sloped roof in portions of it.
And would this area be considered the Monte Vista Village?
No, it does not fall within that.
Would we apply the entire Monte Vista as the basis for comparison, or is there a more narrow comparison we could use?
I think directly in the neighborhood, there have been more contemporary or modern aesthetic houses built there. However, I don't know if many of them have flat roofs. I think that the majority of them, again, do incorporate a sloped roof style, which is why we have that recommendation for the condition.
Thank you.
I did want to follow up on that. Are there any projects we've approved that have been allowed to move forth with all flat roofs?
There are. In other portions of the city where we have existing flat roofs, I'm thinking more over on the Eichler kind of area and adjacent to that where you see a little bit more of that flat roof design. We do have the flat roof design being approved. It really depends on the context of that specific neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Question for the applicant. I'm just curious, would you consider if sloped roofs were added to this home, would it still be considered a modern design?
I mean, of course, you can make a modern design with sloped roof, yes.
Okay.
Would my client like that? No.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So you said the slope roof, is the slope roof necessary with the reduced massing, or are those two separate issues? Like, could you reduce the massing and keep the flat roofs?
Right. I don't know that that was fully considered by RRM, but I think that for the most part, what we see is for flat roof design, we needed a significant amount of reduction. This would not result in a significant amount of reduction. It would just be a smaller reduction along with the sloped roof. So I think used in conjunction, it allows for some of the height to be maintained. But
So the slope roof allows them to keep more massing in a way.
Right.
Got it.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant? No? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to public comments. City Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We have 2 speakers in person and 1 hand raised on Zoom. Our first speaker is Connie Cunningham, followed by Rhoda Fry, followed by Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Connie.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Connie Cunningham. I'm Chair of the Housing Commission, speaking for myself only. I'm also a member of the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance, SCVBA, the Environmental Action Committee. The subject home is located directly above Blackberry Farm Park Preserve, a nature preserve and a priceless gem in our city. I implore you, vote no on Hillside Exception for grading. The house is clearly too large for the lot if the only idea for a backyard is to bulldoze a hillside and build retaining walls for its 59-degree slope. Perhaps this home could have a deck on pillars. This would allow the oak trees to remain in place to provide habitat for birds, other critters, and enjoyment for hundreds of Cupertino visitors. I also implore you to vote no on the tree removal permit for the removal and replacement of protected native oak trees. The applicant has been given the option of replanting with new trees, taking years to mature, or paying a fee without replacing them. That is unacceptable. I strongly suggest also that you revise the design review permit, delete the requirement that says adding sloped roof elements. I like the design as it is. There are other designs like this in Cupertino and in my neighborhood. This subject location does not have meaningful comparisons to make the applicant change his design. I am disappointed to see recommendations suggest that the front of the applicant's proposed house be changed significantly to be in sync with neighbors to the front, and that the city rules also require the applicant to consider the neighbors next door to him. However, no thought went into how the backyard of this home would impact neighbors over the back fence. Cupertino residents enjoy Blackberry Farm Nature Preserve. City residents understand its value. I often walk Stevens Creek Trail with a friend and with my binoculars. There are red-tailed hawks, owls, pygmy nuthatches, chestnut-backed chickadees. There are fish in Stevens Creek. There are beautiful locations to picnic. I am disappointed that after decades, there was this lack of sensitivity to the preserve and its importance to the public. Deeply disappointed. This type of nature preserve does not exist in every city. We are fortunate to have this priceless gem. We will lose it if we are not vigilant. Thank you for your time to speak.
Thank you, Connie. Our next speaker is Rhoda Fry, followed by Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Rhoda.
Hi, good evening. Lots of random comments. And speaking of random comments, you have comments on this within the agenda and also outside of the agenda from comments that were provided previously. Among the ones that you should have had within the agenda are a 2-page letter from the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance, that says just say no, so I hope you read that. I resubmitted it because it wasn't in the agenda packet. And, you know, just from a high level, you're being asked to approve something that the applicant has yet to submit. So this meeting is premature and it should be deferred. I also found some other irregularities in the agenda. For one thing, on the summary, it tells you that the trees are up to 18 inches wide, but then in the resolution, you're being asked to remove trees that are up to 24 inches wide. And by the way, concurring with the preceding speaker, I don't have an issue with a new home with a flat roof. And let's see what else I had. So you all mentioned how many protective trees would be removed, but how many unprotected trees would be removed? It seems like it would be all scraped. And we have not been provided what this project would look like from the park. You know, walking through that area, most homes seem to have decks instead of backyards. I hope you walk the site. The summary should have stated the proximity to the park, the trail, and the creek. When you look at the property from the park, those retaining walls, probably with fencing on top of them, will look like a solid wall because of the steep slope, so you'd be looking up at it, right? We need to get a visual on this stuff, right? The property owner bought a tricky lot, no doubt. If they wanted a backyard, they should have bought elsewhere. Please protect our park and our environment and our recreational values. Please vote no. Yeah, I think I got all my ideas in. Plus, you've got them in writing. I think this is a no-brainer. I have to say, I'm really disappointed. I know that this agenda item was signed off by a number of folks in the planning department, and I'm baffled as to why and how that could have possibly happened. And it's undermined my general trust in our professional staff. And I feel bad about saying that, but I think it needs to be said. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Our next speaker is Peggy Griffin, followed by Lisa Warren. Welcome, Peggy.
Good evening, planning commissioners and staff. I'm in agreement with the previous speakers. Absolutely reject the Hillside exception. They're asking so that they could put a sports court up next to a riparian corridor. So potentially you're going to have, in addition to this massive wall, you're going to have lights and sound. I disagree with that. You need to respect your neighbors, and one of the neighbors is Blackberry Farm. I'm also in support of decreasing the mass and changing the slope. The reason for that is to decrease the mass. At least that's what I got out of reading things. Also, removing the trees. These are big trees. And like the previous speakers say, it takes a long time. And I've seen trees removed and they pay in lieu fees, and so it's still bare. Or they put a palm tree up where an oak tree stood. So if you are considering tree removal and replacement, please, no in lieu fees and comparable trees, not palm trees. The slope is significant. Let's see. Also, I agree that before you do anything, you should see, and the public should see, the view from Blackberry Farm. What exactly is this going to look like? Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. We have no speakers in person and no hands raised on Zoom, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any further questions from the Commission? Commissioner Rao.
Yes. So can you talk about the significant effect when you're considering a categorical exemption on CEQA? Was this project deemed to have any sort of significant effects that would not allow for that CEQA exemption?
Single-family homes are always categorically exempt. Sorry about that. Single-family homes are always presumed to be categorically exempt. Within the last decade, even very large homes on hillsides were the single-family homes. An example in Berkeley from about 10 years ago, there was a major case where you had a home on a slope with a 10-car subterranean garage, and that was found to be categorically exempt after the city had initially wanted to do an EIR. So while you could possibly have visual impacts from the public's view and environmental impact for a single-family home, that's going to be an exempt project under CEQA. So there's still a lot of latitude in terms of discretion on what you do with the permits, but a further CEQA analysis was not something we considered.
But is it fair to say that this is not just an R1, but it is located next to a riparian corridor, and therefore there are unusual circumstances here?
It's a single-family lot that already has a single-family home on it, and it would be getting replaced with a larger single-family home.
Are there exceptions defined for that?
You have always the exceptions to exemptions under CEQA, which would very much require unique circumstances, like protected views from a public viewshed, something like, say, 17 Mile Drive in Monterey. This site admittedly has a public interest in that it's adjacent to a trail, but I don't think you could characterize it as unique circumstances.
So a significant effect is basically defined as a categorical exemption that shall not be used for an activity where there is a reasonable possibility that the activity will have a significant effect on the environment due to unusual circumstances. Would that qualify?
I would say no. It's a single-family home replacing a single-family home on a lot that has the existing slope.
Specifically referring to the tree removal and the grading.
Tree removals alone would not trigger any type of a CEQA analysis. We're not talking about heritage trees or trees that would have special protection. So the tree removal permit is before you tonight, but again, we wouldn't be doing a CEQA document for tree removals on a lot like this.
There is a cumulative impact exception to CEQA exemptions. Can you comment on whether this project would set a precedent for the neighboring homes to go likewise and remove trees and grade the hillside such that it leads to a cumulative impact?
You would look at cumulative impacts where you have foreseeable future projects. There's no permit that's before us on any of those homes that would lead us to have a cumulative impact.
What would be the basis for when you would consider this?
I'm not sure. I'd need a little more detail on what you're asking. I mean, the project before you is, as Emmy described, you have 5 actions, 2 exceptions. 3 of the 5 actions wouldn't even normally be coming to the Planning Commission. So, I mean, the CEQA discussion on single-family homes, I think, is pretty well settled. There have been larger homes that have involved more grading in other areas in California found to be where the exemption is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could I follow on that?
Yes, absolutely.
So just to maybe clarify, in terms of the things that could have a CEQA effect, that the grading, for instance, might be, although in this case that was viewed to not be an issue. Is that correct?
That is correct. Clearly, the grading, I think, jumps out as the issue associated with this project, and especially in relation to Blackberry Farm.
Yeah.
So to say this would be exempt from CEQA is not to say it couldn't have a view impact or an impact from the public, as people have spoken to. The proximity to the trail is certainly an issue. It's just not an issue that would be examined under CEQA beyond an exemption.
Great. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So just to kind of wrap this up in a bow, we cannot deny the CEQA exemption, but we could deny every single one of those other permit requests, correct?
There would be the possibility, I guess, if you felt that this warranted more than the exemption didn't apply, you could find that. And certainly the other 5 actions, as I said, these are all discretionary.
Right. So we could do those and more. We just can't question the CEQA exemption, but we have a lot of latitude beyond that.
Yeah, I'm just sort of offering my advice on CEQA. It's pretty clear for single-family home replacements, even for large homes that involve grading.
All right, thank you.
Was a plan set submitted for this project for commissioners to review? Do we have a detailed plan set?
Yes.
What was the comment from the member of the public that the project is not yet complete for review? I thought there was a member of the public that made a comment.
I think that may have been taken from context of previous agendizing of the item. As you know, this was placed on the agenda and sent out a couple of times prior to this. In the initial iteration, there were not updated plans to reflect staff's conditions. However, the most updated plan set that was sent to you and also included as part of this agenda does show staff's recommendations included on those plans.
Thank you.
I just had one follow-up question on the sloped roof. So if it was a flat roof and you're saying that the massing needs to be reduced, how much would the massing need to be reduced by?
Within the condition, we stipulate that it would need to be reduced to fit within the first story building envelope. There's a portion of it currently that does exceed that because it's taken from a higher grade. So it would really just be about, I want to say like a 1 foot difference in the first story.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for the applicant again. Sorry to make you come up. My question was just from the applicant's or from the resident standpoint who lives here, would they rather have a sloped roof or reduced flat roof?
That I would have to ask him because we haven't really gone over that. But he would really like to keep a flat roof. He's been very adamant about it the entire time. And we've kind of talked about this because they've given us the option too. Hey, if you go sloped, we get rid of one of these, it's going to be a lot easier to pass. And my client's like, let's go with flat, see what happens. And he's just going to push that as hard as he can. If it doesn't work, then we'll go back to a different route. But that's where he's at.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I had one other. I'm curious. So there are actually many places. Oh, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh, you were talking to me?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. There are actually many places in town that would be adjacent to, Stevens Creek Trail, and the other application tonight has some adjacency. I'm just curious. So first of all, I suspect that had there been an objective standard for impact when you're adjacent to, a public space, that it would have been called out in the report already. So that even if there wasn't, I'm curious whether there could be any comment on the kinds of things that have been considered in the past, with the understanding that we are kind of focused on objective standards.
Right. I think for the most part, in most projects, we are trying to look at just objective standards. As Luke laid out, though, this is a project where we can look at some of the more subjective standards. That being said, there aren't any standards really for this specific scenario, meaning grading adjacent to a trail and or a park. There are some policies, general plan policies, things that we want to kind of be in alignment with that would preserve views from those locations, that would preserve the use of those. But again, they're not explicit enough for us to say that we don't need an interpretation by your commission as to how those are applied and or kind of how they would be applied in this case. Now, as for past projects, again, we haven't had a hillside exception. At least when I was doing research, it was 1998 that the last one of this kind came forward. And even within that, they allowed for some rear yard grading, but with an additional setback to the park to be considered. And I would say for all the other residences nearby, for the most part, they have tried to stick within the 5-foot retaining wall limitations. Again, also with some setbacks. Some of them do go up to the property line, but for the most part, some setback. And then as mentioned by one of the commenters here, there are quite a few wooden decks that are being built out to the property lines as well.
Thank you. Maybe it's possible I missed it. Were there requirements or standards for the appearance of the retaining walls there?
Right. There is one requirement. It's again, it's not objective, so it is one of the more subjective portions of our code, and that is through our RHS ordinance, and so that's a standard we pulled over from there. That is to ensure that they're clad, to have either screening in front of them or to ensure that they're, kind of a more pleasing material. And so in this case, we are recommending that the material be the same as the rock wall that you see at the base of that trail, and then again, having the height limit and screening from the vegetation.
Right. So you wouldn't be. So we wouldn't be surprised with some sort of square concrete. Retaining.
Right.
It wouldn't be
no.
like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
So on the retaining walls, when I looked at the property, it looked like there would have to be fences on top of the retaining walls. Is that true? Because otherwise somebody could walk right off and fall down to the next level.
Right. So in this case, and then also in some of the neighboring properties, they do kind of have these ledges created by these retaining walls. And for the most part, you're seeing railing go up, and that's about a 42-inch railing per our building code. And so for the most part, what you see is that is an iron rail, so it's open. Not too many of those properties have any rear gates because they are looking for the views from that property.
Okay, thank you.
I want to go back to the comment from the member of the public about the plan not being complete. I believe one of the conditions of approval is that there are further revisions to the plan required and then a final approval by the Director of Community Development. Can you comment on why that is?
Right. So some of the plans, not all of the plans, have been updated. There are certain structural plans that haven't been reviewed by us for the new design, so those would need to be looked at, the civil drawings, I believe, as well. And then the landscaping plans weren't updated as part of this to reflect, again, that new grading area. And then none of the plans were updated to reflect staff's recommendation for the sloped roof and reduced massing. Again, that's because the applicant is requesting that the
Is
flat
it
roof
commonplace to bring a hearing forth to the Planning Commission when that level of completeness is not yet been achieved?
I think for the most part, we try to have complete plan sets when we try and work on that ahead of time, but I wouldn't say that it's unheard of to have conditions that aren't yet met, so long as they're clear conditions that we understand how they would impact the project design.
So is it fair then to say that commissioners have discretion to table this item until that is complete and we see the final plan so that it doesn't have to go back for more revisions?
The answer to that is yes, you do.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to table this item until the plans are complete. Do I have a second?
My concern with that is I think that there are components of this that we might want to address first. And so we would be forcing this project to go to completion and then having to dial it back again.
Or we could ask for a complete plan that we can review and then give that feedback.
So, can I comment on this? From my perspective, the things that are up for discussion and vote are not going to change with the complete plans. So I think we have all the information we need to vote on it today, and I think it does a disservice to the owner as well as the planning commission as well as the community if we don't go ahead and vote on it today. I don't see how having the complete plans will provide any new information that will change anything specific about the decisions we're being asked to make today.
Chairman, if I could interrupt. So there's a motion to table, and then we seek a second, and there's no debate on this motion.
Yes. Do we have a second? I'm not hearing we have a second. Okay.
No second. Okay. Were there any other questions before we move to comments?
Yes. So there is a riparian corridor setback requirement. What is the setback requirement? And the findings do not specify the exact distance from the riparian corridor?
I'm not sure that I'm aware of the riparian corridor setback that you're referring to. Do you have a section or a policy that I could try and relate it to?
I believe policy is 514, 528, but let's keep the questions going. We can come back to that.
Any other questions? Yes.
I do have one. I hate to do this while you're trying to look something up, though. In response to one of the earlier questions, to Commissioner Linskog's question, you had actually mentioned that the massing would actually be larger if they had a slope, adopted the sloped elements that you had seen out. Can you explain that to me?
Right. I'll clarify that we see it as a reduced mass, and that would not necessarily increase the massing to have the sloped roof. Again, we would want to decrease the height in conjunction with that to match kind of the neighborhood pattern as it exists today.
Okay, great. I think I felt like I heard that differently when the first time you mentioned that the apparent massing would be greater if it had the sloped roof.
I must have misspoken then. I apologize for that. But generally, it would be reduced in our eyes with the sloped roof.
Okay, great.
So sorry, just to clarify, because now I'm confused. So if they were to reduce the massing but keep the flat roof, option A, versus reduce the massing and add a sloping roof, which one gives them more mass?
I don't know that it's that objective, to be honest. And also, I'm not going to say that I'm the expert on this. This is why we have our third-party reviewers for these. That being said, my understanding is that the recommendation is to have the sloped roof, again, to both match the neighborhood and reduce the apparent mass of the building, and then also to reduce the height to reduce the overall mass. Now, if you're saying just reducing the height, if that is good enough, I can't make a determination on that necessarily.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Rao, were you able to find the information?
Let's not hold up this hearing for that. I do have a code here, but I'd rather keep the hearing going. I don't think
Okay,
I need to
then we
vote on
will move on to comments. Any comments from the commission? Commissioner Linskog, is that you wanting to speak, or sorry, I thought you were reaching. All right. Okay. Who would like to go first? Okay, Commissioner Vice Chair.
It's fine. So I kind of agree with the resident that contacted me that I took the tour with, and I don't think the application is complete. I would like to see the complete application. I don't want to be redesigning the project up here on the dais. I want the complete project brought to us. I'm disappointed that the attachment that the resident mentioned from the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance was somehow not included in the packet. And the three walls are just not acceptable. I mean, it is true they would look like a single wall if you're looking up from the trail. And the applicant knew when they bought the property of all these challenges. Other houses, they put in decks for backyards, and they haven't created these flat yards through massive grading and tree removal. Personally, I have no problem with the flat roof. And the garage, prefer not to have the front-facing garage, but that's something that is not a terrible big deal either, because all the other houses have the front-facing garage. But I would not support this project.
Sorry, was that a motion or?
No, that was not a motion.
Comments? Commissioner Fung?
Sure. So, in general, I would try to support the right of the landowner to do the things which are permitted in the, by the zoning. I think that, the big questions for me really were whether there were considerations that apply because of the adjacency to Blackberry Farm. I think that that's not the case. And I think that they have actually attempted to, address those, that concern in a reasonable manner, at least, within the standard of how they, how we should view the approval. There are a couple things where, it's a little bit taller than, I would also add, in conjunction with Commissioner Scharf's comment, I have no problem with a flat roof. I think that if it's a flat roof, which does cause more massing, I'm glad that we're clear on that, and it's a little bit taller than what the standard stands at. And I think that that's worthy of consideration about whether whether that can be addressed. But other than that, I didn't see an issue. I don't have an issue with the garage, particularly because of the cul-de-sac, which I think was the big, for me at least, coming into this one, that was probably one of the bigger ones, the bigger asks here. So, I think I'm, in general, my recommendation would be to consider to try to address this places where it's a small amount out of the, where you're looking for a small exception. And otherwise, I don't have a problem with this application.
Comments? Commissioner Linskog?
Okay, so I don't have a problem with the flat roof either. I think if you're a homeowner, you should have the right to build a modern home if that's what you wish. I do think that reducing the massing, if it's a significant issue, can be achieved any which way the owner wants to do it, whether they want to reduce the height of the flat roof by a foot or put in the slope-roofed elements. I'm fine either way. I am fine with the garage design, fine with the design review permit for new two-story residence with second-story side setbacks, as listed in the application. Fine with the minor residential permit for a balcony. I am not okay with the hillside exception on the slope. this is it's a riparian corridor. It's Blackberry Farm. It's a major green lung for our city. We are deficient in terms of our canopy as a city, and to then, we should be looking at putting more trees, and especially these are protected oak trees. The last thing we should be doing is looking at getting rid of trees. So yeah, I mean, the owner knew this when they bought this property. I mean, there's really to come, and they've seen the neighboring homes, to come back now and to want to just kind of grade that, even with the setback that they've agreed to, it's still excessive and unjustifiable in my book. And same thing with all the tree removals. Anything over 12 inches, I would not agree to. And the width of diameter of 12 inches and above to create the flat yard areas. So. I mean, I'll wait to do the motions, but I would approve the residential design stuff, but I would not approve the hillside exception and the tree removal permit.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I think I have said my piece. I would not be supportive of the project in general because the plans are not complete. I would not be supportive of the hillside grading, not be supportive of the tree removal. And in general, I think we need to be respectful of Blackberry Farm. If we allow for these changes, it starts to creep through the neighborhood. It affects the possibility of the rest of the hills starting to look at grading and tree removals. I also think we need to apply the RHS a little bit further than what we have. It's at this point not something I'm comfortable moving forward. I'm willing to reconsider if there's a revised plan that were brought to us with changes.
Okay, I will make my comment then. So from my standpoint, I think I'm happy that the applicant is bringing this forward, and it's great that they are choosing their home in Cupertino. I am fine with most of the home remodel elements. I don't think that they impede upon Blackberry Farm. I am a very frequent park goer at McClellan Ranch Park, and so I'm quite familiar with the oasis that it is, the green space. And the feeling that you have when you walk there is that you are in nature because the homes are really not very visible from it. I went back and I looked again. It seemed like most of the homes in the area either had balconies or at most a 5-foot retaining wall, but not anything more than that. But I think to not let this applicant have any form of yard, I think would be a little bit unreasonable and also not characteristic with the neighborhood. That said, I think that we set a really important precedent with the grading work that we do here. And if we do have one home that is grading all the way up to Blackberry Farm, who knows what other precedents we are then setting. And then next thing you know, Blackberry Farm is an entirely different park that feels more like a neighborhood rather than a nature oasis. So, from my standpoint, I would definitely deny the hillside exception for grading. I think there's possibly a small amount of rear yard that could make sense for this home, but probably not the 15 feet of retaining wall that's currently proposed. Tree removal permit, same thing. I would not approve that, especially if we are reducing the grading. You should be able to keep a lot more of the trees on that property anyway. On the flat roof, I'm happy to hear that most of the commission is okay with that because from my standpoint, when we have architectural styles and we start to mix different elements of that, it no longer becomes that architectural style. So I think, and some cities even have this as part of their ordinance, is that you must be one architectural style. And I think for this to be modern, it should have a flat roof. I've seen other flat roofs in Cupertino, so from my standpoint, I'm okay with that. So those are my comments. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion if I can get a second. So I move to find the project exempt from CEQA and approve the R1 exception for the garage design, the design review permit for the 2-story residence with 2nd-story side setbacks, a minor residential permit for the balcony, but do not approve the hillside exception or the tree removal permit, and do not require the staff recommended conditions that the applicant revise the design to reduce their building mass.
Sorry, can you repeat? So you would be denying the hillside and tree removal, correct?
Yes, and saying they don't need to revise the design to reduce the building mass.
City attorney, I don't know how we Is it okay for me to clarify at this point, or do we need a seconder on the motion?
Excuse me, are we voting on all of these at once, or shouldn't we be doing them individually?
I recommend probably receiving a second, and then you can make suggest a friendly amendment.
Do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. From my standpoint, Commissioner Scharf, I'm fine with voting on the entire thing. Are there specific components that you wanted to pull out?
No, so can you repeat your motion?
Sure.
Commissioner Linscott?
So the move to find the project exempt from CEQA and conditionally approve the R1 exception for the garage design, the design review permit for the two-story residence with second-story side setbacks of less than 15 feet and the second to first floor area ratio exceeding 66%, and the minor residential permit for the balcony, but do not approve the hillside exception or the tree removal permit for the removal and replacement of the oak trees, and also do not require the staff recommended conditions that the applicant revise the design to reduce the building mass.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why we would take an allowed 66% second to first floor area ratio to 81%.
81? Where do you get 81?
I think before we proceed, I think the chair wanted to make a friendly amendment. That might be the most orderly place to go next.
I actually had a clarifying question for staff on this. My understanding was the staff was proposing for the building massing to be reduced, whether it was a flat or a sloped roof, it would still be reduced, correct?
Right. Our condition is to bring the building into compliance with one of our building envelope requirements. And so that is the reduction that you see, that 1 foot reduction that we discussed before. So if you're striking both of those, that I think would be an exception as well to our code.
Okay, yes, that would have been my friendly amendment, would be to have the flat roof in compliance with staff recommended building massing.
I'll accept that.
Yeah, the seconder, do you accept that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
And Commissioner Rao, you had comments?
Yes, I go back to this table of allowed versus proposed, and this is a significant increase in what is proposed, right? For second to first floor area ratio, I think the justification does not, to me, make sense. I mean, all it says is a design review permit is required, but why would we allow this? Why would we go from, I can understand if it is 66 to 68%, why would you go from 66 to 81%?
Right. I'll maybe reframe this as the 66% is not a limitation necessarily, but a threshold for when you would need to start doing an architectural review. And the reason for that is we typically are wanting to see tiering of the second floor, meaning that it's a little bit smaller than the first floor. And when we don't see that, that's when we want to make sure that it's following a design style similar to this one, the contemporary style, and that all of those kind of points are being met along the way. And so again, this is more of it just triggering the design review. It's just the threshold we have is the 66%. It's not necessarily saying that you can't have more than that.
At what proposed threshold would it be unacceptable to staff? Would you allow 100%?
I think that if we could try and justify that, I feel like that is outside of the norm and definitely not something that we would usually consider. But for the most part, I don't think that the 80% is, again, outside of the norm that I see when I review these permits. Again, since they are typically staff level, I feel pretty comfortable saying that.
Yeah, I think as Emmy said, is it's really a threshold that if you stay under 66%, you avoid the design review process altogether. If you go above that, you now have gotten yourself into a discretionary design review. So that's really the threshold. I don't know what the maximum would be allowed if there's ever been 100%. I don't know, but this is not uncommon to exceed 66%. It's really the applicant's choice. That if they want to go over that, they now go through a design review process they otherwise wouldn't.
Is 80% common?
I think so. I'd have to really go back and look at it, but that's just, not much of an increase over 66. I think if somebody's going to want to go over, they're going to go over by more than just 2 or 3%. Otherwise, I think they would avoid the process.
And what sort of visual impact does it have for the rear view as seen from the Blackberry farm?
That's very difficult to say. I mean, this home is sitting up on the top of the flat area. I'm not even sure what the distance is from the trail, but it's quite a bit. So I think while the grading certainly has a potential view impact from the trail, the house itself and the second story setback, I think that would be minimal when viewed from the trail from Blackberry Farm. The house is clearly going to be much bigger than the existing home. It's probably 3 times the size.
I'll just add to that there is a nearly 40-foot setback to the residence from the property line. And again, as the applicant mentioned, there is still about 30 feet to where you have the actual trail itself start. And so there's a pretty significant distance between the two. However, there's also tree canopy that we see that's existing there, again, that we've discussed as part of this, that we do expect to screen majority of the view of the residence from that trail.
So does staff agree that there is a need to protect the riparian corridor given the location of this property, and what considerations has staff taken into account given the proximity to the riparian corridor?
When you say protection to the riparian corridor, I'm not sure what exactly.
Proximity to the riparian corridor.
But by protections, what would you have in mind?
What approvals have you denied that you would otherwise have allowed in an R1?
I don't know. Again, we're dealing with a pretty atypical project. I have no direct experience in the city with anything like this.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Vice Chair.
So you mentioned going from 66 to 81 was only a couple of percent. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
I didn't say a couple of percent. I said it's not all that significant. If you know you're going to have to go through design review at 66%, I think it would be unlikely for somebody to want to go through that process at 68 or 69.
Okay.
They're probably going to exceed it by more to want to go through the added cost and time.
All right. Do we have any other comments on this motion?
Actually, I might give one just because I think this issue was something that that did come up in this discussion. That perhaps for in the future there might be some consideration of formulating perhaps recommendations for standards for houses that are adjacent to. It's a kind of weird thing. I live near Hoover Park, but I don't think that warrants the same level of review that would be true at Blackberry Farm or Stevens Creek Trail, that kind of thing. So I think that I would just make that recommendation. That's something to consider in the future. Maybe that's not something, it's too subjective, but probably worth considering.
Any other comments? No. Are we ready? Actually, I have one question for staff. Sorry. Okay. If we, in this motion, we reject the hillside grading, then what is the next step for the applicant? Would they return with a reduced grading plan, or would they return with nothing at all? Like, how does that work?
If you deny this application, then that would be, my assumption is the end of it unless it's appealed. And so they could resubmit for a new application with a revised design or even with the same design and have it be reheard by your commission. But again, that application itself would be completed.
Well, I meant for just specifically the hillside component.
Right. So that's specifically for the hillside exception. If you're talking about alternative designs that may come about, there is still an allowance for up to 500 square feet of grading on the 30% slope. So they may come for a revised design with that. Discussions of decks have happened. So maybe that would be something that they come back with. I'm not going to really speculate on what it would be, but there are alternatives that could potentially be pursued.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair, did you have a question or comment? Okay. Are we ready? I think we're ready to entertain a vote on this.
I don't see the seconded by in the, oh, there we go. Okay. Are we voting?
Yes.
Tracy.
Oh, I thought it comes out. Yeah. I hit it.
The motion carries with Vice Chair Scharf and Commissioner Rao voting no.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone be interested in a 5-minute break? Okay, we will take a 5-minute break before the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you.